Hello there, this is Rom Wills coming back at you with yet another podcast dealing with father issues. Now, this is a very important topic that's not addressed enough. Many men out here have issues dealing with their fathers because the fathers were either absent or the fathers were too tough for them, or the relationship wasn't strong enough. The fathers didn't train them. It's myriad issues involved. You know, of course, the most significant issue is the father not being present, but then the father could have physically been present, but not engaged with their son or teaching them something. And that's a tough thing. I'm going to tell you what, that is a tough thing for a young man to deal with. Now, I'm going to share some personal thing with me, right? I kind of, it was interesting because my mother and father divorced when I was 2 years old. But at the same time, I didn't have the same father issues that others did because I still had my grandfather in life. I had my uncle. I had older cousins. As I was a teenager, there were several, the neighborhood I lived in, there were men who, they were surrogate fathers. Everything from a Cliff Huxtable to a ghost. So it was just like, it was an interesting thing. And I've talked about that before. So one of the things I learned in life was to look at mentors and father figures and everything. But you're having a situation now where some guys don't even get that much. And, they just falling along in life. Now, this ain't tooting my own horn or anything, but that's a big thing why so many will refer to me either as OG or Uncle Rom. I've had a lot of statements by someone in the comments and also privately. They'll say, they wish their father had told me this. I'm like the father they never had. And that's a responsibility. That's not just with me. That's not just with, there's a lot of guys like that. I've talked to some older men, and just let me back up a bit, just to be clear. This ain't limited to the black community, because sometimes somebody think I'm having a conversation. I'm just talking merely about black men. No, I've seen this in a lot of communities. I've had white men say this to me. I've had white men who've had to take responsibility for younger kids. And I've known them. I've seen it on jobs. I've seen it every place. Because that's the one thing. Understand something. The nature in man is not just to find his own way. Too many have to, but to be raised up and trained and shown how to be a man. In indigenous cultures, outside of Western culture, you always had what's called a rites of passage. And depending on the culture, it would be different activities, but basically, older men would take the younger men and basically show them manhood. They would show them everything from how to hunt, how to be a warrior. Some depending on the culture, especially some in traditional Africa, and also I think this has happened in the Pacific, South Pacific, in some island cultures. They make sure the young men even know how to have sex correctly. But they would show them. And in some cultures, the rites of passage was so vicious that a possibility a boy couldn't survive it. But the way the cultures looked at it, if they didn't survive it, they didn't need to survive. And they understood that. And of course, they had rites of passage for women too, but we focused on men's issues. And so, but those were those cultures. Now you have a culture now, you can't even really say where a man, or a male rather, can be even recognized as a man. You could say, well, he graduated high school, but you get some guys who never really fully develop. One of the issues we have out here, we have a lot of juvenile males, and that could last all their lives. That's why you have males who are in their 40s, 50s, even 60s, but they walking around dressed like kids. I remember when I had washer dryer put into a home I had, right? And I remember it was a dude, one of the helpers. He was in his 40s, but he walking in there, he's sagging. Got his underwear all showing, no belt on, and I'm like, man, you supposed to be an adult male. This how you coming in here? And he probably picked up I had some disdain, but I was just, I just gave a look like, are you kidding me? But that's normal. Because what you have is, since you don't have a rites of passage, something to really lead a man, or even a man in their background, true man, just to say, hell, this is how you supposed to carry yourself. The guys just grow up and they just doing whatever. Like I said, staying in a juvenile thing. Now, it's benign actually. It's actually benign if they just, they just do their thing, stay out of trouble. But then you get another set. They realize that they didn't have that father figure, and they become angry. That's one thing. You get a group of men together, and this is something that my mentor, Master Yao and Yamache Morris, had pointed out, because he's dealt with it a lot when he's doing seminars and everything. You get a group of men together, and you get them talking about their fathers. It gets vicious. It gets vicious. And it gets to the point, it's such a deep thing, because sometimes it's not even about just their biological fathers, but just older men. And you see that a lot. You get a lot of younger males calling, having just total disrespect for an older male, even if that older male hasn't interacted with them or something, because they have disrespect for anyone older than them. But that's because they didn't have that training. They had that neglect. And the problem with that is they might not even be conscious of why they have the issue. They might not even be conscious of it, but they'll still have that reaction. And because sometimes, man, stuff like that gets deep. But at the same time, when a man comes into any of these males' lives and talks to them as a father would, and that's not all like, oh, you such a great son. Sometimes that shit's some tough love. Like men who have been drill sergeants in the military, they've raised up some men. They've raised up some men because they were like father figures. When you get like in maybe some poor neighborhoods where you have an epidemic of single mothers, and like I said, this ain't just in the black community. I've seen this same thing in communities that were primarily non-black. I've seen this in white communities, not so much the Asian communities. That's one thing I give them, And in America, you starting to see it. It's starting to creep up a bit more in Hispanic communities. But, you get these kids, they might not have a father figure in the home, but then all of a sudden the coach can tell them whatever. Those coaches, that's why you get some of those teams and the coaches end up becoming bigger than just a mere football coach or a mere basketball coach or baseball coach, just giving them things to do. They become father figures for them. And like I said, sometimes it's tough love. And, the first time I thought about this was when I worked with this young, true to the game thug. People would label him a Ray Ray. And I remember he was saying some stuff, and I didn't talk in a nice, calm way I usually do on this channel. That's one thing I've said. When I'm not being recorded, y'all see a different side of Rom. And I just gave him some tough love. I talked to him in a harsh manner. And it wasn't putting him down. It was like a father. I called him out on some shit. So this Ray, this dude who looked like he could rob somebody, this dude who was tearing up the women, this dude teared up. And he said, man, nobody ever told me that. And it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't mean, but it was just tough and straight to the point, how he was carrying himself. And that's when I first started, that's when I really first started realizing that there's a major issue out here with men dealing with the father issues. And, this is just a brief podcast on it, but it's something to think about. It's something to think about now. It's one of the reasons I personally spend a lot of time with my sons, my biological sons. Even if sometimes they might be doing something, one could be on a computer, one on an iPad or something, and I'm just sitting there chilling, but they always look over at me They always look over at me and they feel like so comfortable that I'm just there, even if I ain't saying anything to them. You know? So that's an important thing. That's a big thing. And that father issue thing, I mean, that's something that could be taken. That's a major comment. That ain't even just a 10 to 15 minute podcast. That's something that has to be stayed on. And I'll probably hit some more subjects about that in the future, because we there's a lot of stuff that people got to really start dealing with, and that's a very important one, dealing with those father issues. So I'll just say stay tuned. Anyway, I'll talk to y'all later. Peace and blessings.